Hello, one and all, and welcome to a bonus video, I suppose. I've been told, and it has been requested of me to create, I guess, a bonus episode of this particular Let's Play, but it's not really so much as an episode as it is more of a, I guess, an audio podcast thing, recap, summarization, analyzation, all that biz about the game and my experiences with it and my thoughts and feelings on the various aspects of it. I'm kind of going into this not 100% knowing what it's going to end up being by the end, but if you wanted to hear me talk more about this game, then, well, I'm about to. Okay, so Katawa Shoujo, it was a very, very good game, obviously. I believe I made my thoughts very known on that. Admittedly, I didn't get a lot of time to talk about it because the credits of this game are so dang short, so I suppose I can talk a little bit more about that and how this game is very impressive in the sense that they were able to make a lot with very little. And I said this, I believe, in the very first episode, and I'll say it again. I find it incredibly bizarre that this is just a for-free game that you can just Google and download off their website at any point you want. Like, at no point has this ever been on Steam. They've asked for absolutely nothing, and I find that to be, quite frankly, absurd, because this game is bare minimum, I want to say, worth maybe like $20. So, that right out the gate, you definitely get your money's worth when you ain't spending none and you get something this dang good. So, my good golly gosh. So, I guess there are a few things I can cover. So one of the things I guess I need to bring up right here and now is I've been told that there are some people who might be disappointed with the fact that I never saw the more adult-oriented scenes, because some of them actually provide additional dialogue and context and emotional connections to characters and the like in them. Okay, so I didn't show them on the Let's Play because I don't want to be getting in trouble for that sort of thing, but off screen, yeah, okay, I saw them, and in my personal opinion, I believe that Lily's first, let's just call them love scenes, her first love scene and Rin's final love scene are probably the ones that are most affected by the skip adult content feature of this game. Everything else isn't 100% necessary. At best, you just kind of get some mild fluffiness. I don't know how else to describe it. Or in the case of Emi, a very bizarre comedic scene. And in the one case with Shizune, or rather with Misha, horrifying awkwardness and discomfort. And you know what? So I just want to point that out. So yeah, I saw them. I get them. Those are the ones that I would say are actually really effective for the story. I feel like if you're gonna play this game yourself, those are the ones you really do want to actually see. They're also, I should say, oddly, this is gonna be really weird to say, almost none of these are really all that graphic, really, except for Hanako's. That is the only one that is actually very, very lewd. All the other ones are actually more implied than anything else. But that's just from my analysis and my opinion. But so anyway, going back to that Misha thing, you know what? That actually leads to another thing I could talk about: bad endings. So all of the girls have bad ends, basically. Or at the very least, nowhere near as happy of an end. And miraculously, I managed to make all the right choices, so I got all of the good endings for all the girls. So that's pretty fantastic. But I suppose I can briefly discuss what goes on in said bad times, the darkest timelines, as it were. I guess we'll just go in order of the girls that we went in this actual Let's Play. Starting with Emi. If you run after her in the kitchen, when, you know, you're presented with a choice of going after her after she gets offended and leaves her kitchen, or to stay with her mom and talk to her, if you go after Emi, basically, you get into an argument, a pretty substantial one, and it goes very, very poorly. And at that point, you're basically in the red, and you're given one final lifeline, basically, I believe, where if you'll run into Misha, and you'll confide in her some things, and she'll give you advice, and if you listen to her, I believe you can still repair it, but either way, if you don't do the right thing, you'll have one last discussion with Emi, who fully embraces her hurt people and push people away mentality that we saw little tiny flashes of in the golden timeline. And she basically goes off on a big tirade about, how dumb Hisao is for thinking that Emi actually cared about him, and how stupid he is for doing so, and all that. And especially after you see the good ending and you know that that's all just a big lie and she's just in incredible pain, it hurts a lot to look at that. On top of that, Hisao obviously doesn't notice any of that. He just assumes, oh, I guess I was just a massive idiot, and Emi always treated this like a complete joke, and this relationship absolutely meant nothing to her. And both parties end up leaving very depressed and full of depression. Yeah, and it's just all around really terrible, and then the credits play. Do not recommend. I would, in fact, request that you not go that route, because it will hurt your soul. As for Hanako, this is apparently considered legendarily the worst bad end of all of them. I think another one might have a bit of a thing to say about that, but I can see why people would really dislike this one. Basically, if you don't listen to Lily, and you continue to sort of do the sort of smothering mentality with Hanako, she will absolutely snap. And she will go on a very loud, very angry tirade about how much she hates both Hisao and Lily, how much she despises being pitied, how much she hates everything that's going on, and obviously it's implied that, this is all during her depressive episode. So there's a degree of which it could be seen as just her, being so overly emotional she's saying things she doesn't mean, but at the same time, it ends long before you're able to find out if that's the case or not. Either way, at the end of it, Hanako really hates pretty much everybody, and the CG for it is really scary because she's looking right at the camera and she is yelling at you. Do not recommend. I would prefer to not ever have to see that. But there you go. Next up would be Shizune, and that would be to quote-unquote comfort Misha, which is just straight up, it's a sex scene, and it is awkward, uncomfortable. I don't know what anybody would get out of that, and you know what? I think both characters involved would agree with that, because they obviously regret it, but because they did it, there's really no going back at that point, because Hisao basically checks out on the whole trying to cheer up Misha thing, because he feels like an awkward monster with the whole, cheating on his girlfriend thing. So not only is he not able to help Shizune with, helping out Misha in any regard, who also would obviously not like to be, a part of anything here, because she's also in a bit of a self-destructive mood, given the things she was attempting to do in the first place. So not only does Shizune not have that backup from Hisao also, cheated on Shizune, so he's feeling pretty awkward about it and would rather not be around her too. This basically amounts to Shizune realizing in her mind that she never finds out about this, actually, no, but she does internalize it as her being an absolutely terrible friend, and basically she comes to the conclusion that she made Misha and Hisao's lives worse, so she breaks it off with Hisao, and she just kind of becomes reclusive. The friend group breaks up, no hope of being able to fix it. Credits roll, the end. So, depressing in a way, but I never once bore witness to such a scene of awkward depression in my entire life. So that's an experience and a half. And, okay, so next up we have Rin. Now, Rin's is interesting because she's the only one of the 5 girls to have 3 endings. She has a bad ending, a neutral ending, and a good ending. We got the good ending. That's the one you want to go for. That's the good times. That's what everybody here is here for. That's what we all want. That's all we all need. We're doing good. However, the neutral ending is more so along the lines of Hisao doesn't really find a way to make any sort of emotional connection to Rin whatsoever. And Rin comes to the conclusion internally for herself that whatever it is she's trying to get from Hisao, the bond that she wants with him is just unobtainable. That she basically decides that, all right, so, you know, we're not helping each other in any way. It'd probably be for the best if you just forgot about me and they never see each other again. And credits roll on that one. The bad ending... there's some debate for it, but it's sort of implied, because this happens during the self-destruction phase of Rin, where she's doing things for artistic merit and trying to be inspired by things. But if things get so dang bad and you don't make any efforts to fix things with her, it's sort of implied she ends her life? Or at the very least, that's something she's heavily considering. It doesn't get into a lot of detail, quite honestly. But, obviously I don't like it. So we're just gonna not. Lastly, Lily's bad end really isn't even a bad end so much as it is a neutral end, as it basically just ends after she and Akira get in the car to leave for Scotland. And that's about it. It just ends. It's like, all right, well, goodbye, Lily. We're all on our own now. The end. So, that's a thing. You know, out of all of the bad ends, that is probably the least volatile and scary of the endings. Still very heart-wrenching and sad, but aside from that, you know, it's, everybody comes out okay and stable. A friendship with Lily is still conceivable at that juncture at the very bare minimum. So there's that. Also, I guess I can bring up the final ending, the ultimate bad end. Say you don't end up with any of the girls, and you have nobody to spend the, you know, end of Act 1 festival with. You basically see no reason why you shouldn't or hang out with Kenji. So you just do, and you guys go up to the roof, and you have a manly picnic, as it were. And there's whiskey, and they get the drunk. You also learn, I believe, the implication for why Kenji hates women so much is because he once, he had sex with his girlfriend once, and he was unaware of the fact that that would be exhausting. So he interpreted it as her stealing his life force? His soul, his energy? It was weird. And that caused him to freak out, and that's why he hates women. Anyway, so the point is, Hisao gets very drunk, and Kenji gets very flaily and aggressive. And long story short, Hisao falls off the roof and dies. And I know that doesn't sound like something that would have actually happened, but I assure you it is. It is a thing that happens. Obviously, worst possible end. It would already have been that had you just spent time with Kenji for a long period of time, but hey, also you die. Not even of your heart condition, you just fall off the roof. So, yeah, that was a thing. And that's basically all of the bad endings. So what else could I possibly talk about? Okay, so I guess I can go over my general thoughts on all of the routes, because that is, you know, I didn't really get a ton of time to do it on the credits of each one. Emi's story, I find really, really good. It's a story of trauma, it is a story of loss, and it's a story of trying to find a way to mentally kind of cope with it and find a way to be able to let yourself be happy after the fact, and I think that's really great. Emi, as a character, is just completely delightful. She is adorable as all hell, very, very cute, very, very kind, She just has, we all have our issues, and she has hers, and if you get through them and you do everything right, you're able to help her come to a little bit more terms with her father's passing, and she's able to open up and let Hisao in, and they're able to be happy together. And I like to think that they're able, in all of these, I like to think that they're able to, Hisao and the girl of choice is able to establish a very long and very happy relationship with them. But it's just really solid. There's not a ton I feel to say about Emi's route, because I'd say hers and one other that we'll get to, I feel like is, I guess, the most simple, but that sounds insulting. It's the most straightforward story ideas, as opposed to the other three that are, two of them are kind of, straightforward stories that, bada bang, bada boom, bada bop, that all makes sense. Whereas the other three I find are trying to make very strong directions and very strong points. That's not to say that, Emi's and the other girls isn't doing that too, but I'm bad with words, you see, and that's a problem for when you're trying to do something like this. But I don't know. I feel like each and every one of these girls, each one has their own issue that I feel like people will either be able to fully relate to or not. And if you can't relate, you'll at least be able to fully sympathize with. I can't relate with Emi, but I can fully sympathize with everything that's gone with, in her life, everything that's happened. I can't say I know how it feels to experience any of the things she did. The loss of her legs, the loss of her father, the attempts at, relationships only to just not be able to, and pushing people away as a result. But I can get into her mind, and I can understand why she thought things the way she thought them. And I think the story did a really great job of making Emi so lovable and endearing that when she does get upset with you, you realize there has to be something more to it. Because Emi's lovable side is so prevalent and feels so genuine that when she gets depressed or angry, you see it as something that's clearly very wrong, and you want to try and figure it out and help her, less than you think, oh, the original impression I got from her was a facade and not actually who she is. I don't get that. I get that she was a very sweet and very kind and flirty and adorable woman who just had some emotional foibles that needed sympathizing and help with in an understanding way. So I feel like that's a really good hallmark for her character, and a sign of the writer of Emi's route, that they did a very good job. You never feel like she's a bad person, and you want to make it work. You want to figure out what exactly is going on in her head, and you want to help her through it, and that's great. Emi, absolutely fantastic story. Next up, we've got Hanako, and Hanako's is, I feel like it's kind of like Emi's, but significantly more so. Because not to knock Emi, because you can't rate and compare trauma. That's messed up, and you should never do that. No one's pain is stronger than anyone else's pain. But I feel like, I guess from the outside looking in, Hanako is covered in burn scars, and she lost her entire family, and she had to go to an orphanage. And it caused her to become, very reclusive and locked up inside, and just, scared witless. She has a lot of trauma, and I feel like it's safe to assume she's got, like, post-traumatic stress disorder. I can't, like I said, I need to preface all of this. I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose anybody with anything. This is just my impressions from what I saw, And it was a very delicate topic, obviously, and I had no idea how it was gonna go, or how Hisao, or the player, as it were, was going to be able to help her, really. Because it's the kind of thing that, just good intentions and nice words isn't really going to ever be able to fully heal. And as we saw with her story, I feel like Hanako's story had a lot of downs before it had a really strong up at the end, where you really just didn't know if a relationship was ever even going to work between the two of them just because of who they are and the way that it transpired. But at the very end, they were able to reconcile, and they were able to understand but each other's personal opinions and thoughts and why they did the things that they did. They were able to finally make that, that connection, that real legitimate breakthrough. Because, Hisao talked about how there being a wall between him and Hanako. Eventually, that wall did break, and they were able to make that first real legitimate connection where they were able to understand where both sides were coming from. And thanks to that, while the story ended before you really got a chance to see it develop further, you get the overwhelming impression that it will end up working out just fine in the end. I find that might be the only real weakness of Hanako's story, is that it's the only one of the... Okay, well, it's one of two, but we'll get to the other one. I keep doing that, but the thing with Hanako is you don't get into a relationship with Hanako until literally the end of her story. So you're left with a lot of vague ideas about how far and how helpful and eventful their relationship ends up being, and if they're able to, get through all of those roadblocks that, that they're going to continue to have. You basically saw and bore witness to them get through, like, the first two really, really big ones, making that true, for real, genuine emotional connection and truly comprehending what each other are thinking. And those are the most important ones, without question, romance or no, even just as a platonic friendship, that's good to see. But unlike, say, with Emi or Shizune or Lily, you don't get to see them as a couple, really. And I feel like that's a bit of a shame. I would have liked to see just a tiny bit more. And I'll talk about this. Actually, I can talk about it now. I find it interesting that only Lily had an epilogue. I feel like all of the girls could have really used an epilogue. Like, just a 1 month later, one last conversation between Hisao and the girl of the story. Just to check in. It's just like, hey, we ended on an uplifting note, and things are still going okay. There maybe things are a little shaky or a little unsure, but we're optimistic. That sort of thing. I feel like the Hanako story could have really used that. Just as, like, 1 month later, and, you see Hanako and Hisao, and they're in a relationship, and Lily has come back, because Lily doesn't even come back until the story's ended already, so you don't even know how she responds to any of this. You assume she'd be supportive because she's Lily, and she's wonderful like that, but you know what I mean, right? And it's like, all right, things are still kinda, touch and go, and we're still trying to figure things out, but, we're both feeling happy and optimistic about it. I feel like the Hanako story could have most used that epilogue. Even more than the Lily one, and I feel like the Lily one used it very well, but we'll talk more about that when we get to her. So, that's my only real major criticism with the Hanako route. It's still very, very solid, and it's clear that a lot of thought and attention went into making sure that entire story was gonna make sense and feel good and hit you where it hurt and heal you immediately after, and, nothing but kudos for that. Shizune. Okay, so Shizune and her story is a good one. It really is. I feel like, I can't confirm this, but I feel as if it suffered from a bit of a rewrite problem. Because I'm aware of the fact that originally, at least in the beta, at the very bare minimum, the original intention for the route was that Hisao and Shizune were never going to be able to help Misha, and she would basically end up committing suicide no matter what you did, and the best possible ending was the two of them finding a way to be able to cope and move on from it, and that sort of thing. And I guess they must have thought, well, that's just way too damn dark, so knock that noise off and fix it up. And you could kind of tell, because I feel like the Shizune story had a really good beginning and its ending was really heartwarming too, with the three of them actually being able to reconcile and really, you know, come together one last time, and you feel optimistic about everything, so that's good. But that middle section is so weird. I feel like the entire part of the story where you're in Shizune's house with her family was kind of completely pointless. Like, I almost feel like you, with the exception of the fact that Misha gets a haircut, none of it was actually all that important. Really? I was like, it's more just kind of like, hey, here's some quirky things about her brother and dad. Ain't they crazy? All right, well, it's been an hour and a half. We're done now. Head back to the school, and the story can continue now. You know? And it even shows. Shizune's story is the longest of the five of them. And I don't think it has any reason to be. Or at the very least, if it was going to be that long, it needed more focus. Especially in that middle section where it was so weird because it was mostly just, here's a scene with Hisao and Shizune's brother, and now Hisao and her dad. And every time the scene happens, it's like, Shizune will show up briefly, it's like, yeah, me and Misha are going shopping, bye. And then it just goes along with this weird, entirely not necessary scene. Like, we didn't get a scene where when you hung out in Emi's route when you hung out with Emi's mom, there was a real story reason for it. You know, you meet her organically because she's at the track meet, and you just say, oh, hi, Hannah, nice to meet you. You get a feel for her personality, and that's nice. And then later, during the emotional stuff, she's able to provide you with a little bit of advice and understanding and help you figure out what to do next. So, that makes sense. But, you know, with Hanako, obviously, you didn't really get any of those sort of things because she doesn't have family, but you know, I'll briefly touch on the fact that Rin apparently has parents. They're mentioned, but you never meet them. You never see her family. So it would be like if in the middle of Rin's story, you just had this hour-and-a-half intermission where you just have these weird conversations with, I don't know, Rin's possible sister and mother, and it's just weird, and you don't really get along with them. And then it's gone, and none of it actually amounted to anything. That's basically what happened in Shizune's story. And even Misha's haircut, like, the only noteworthy thing that happened in that part of the game, of the story, I get that she did it because it's like a stress thing, and, you know, because it's implied that, you know, when she got rejected by Shizune the first time, that's when she changed her hair up the first time, so she was feeling stressed and messed up, so she did something crazy with her hair again. And that's the implication there, and I understand the symbolism and the logic behind it, but it didn't really need to be a thing. It didn't really add that much, you know? So I just feel like that sort of thing. So I think you cut out that entire, you know, summer house segment. I feel like the entire story immediately becomes, like, twice as strong because you don't meander pointlessly for so long. And I feel like I'm being really aggressive about this, but I feel like I'm not entirely in the wrong here because from what I hear, Shizune's story is almost always the least liked of the five. I don't see any people call it horrible, just not as strong as the other four, which I have to agree with. Again, the beginning was solid, and so is the ending. I feel like the reason why it feels so different than the other stories is because it's not just the story of Hisao and Shizune, it's also of Misha. And I feel like a lot of the conflict and the emotional turmoil and everything has more to do with Misha than Shizune, which I feel is like is kind of sort of the problem about it a little bit. Like, I feel like Shizune played a supporting role in her path more so than any other girl I can think of. Like, Shizune, once Shizune and Hisao are a couple, they're pretty damn solid. They don't really have any conflict with each other. It's just Lily's emotional baggage and issues that come up that you have to try and help her out with. Because, you know, she's a mutual friend. And that's not a bad angle to go for. So I understand where they were going with it. But it's weird. It's almost like there was a Misha route at one point, but they cut it out and decided to fuse it with the Shizune one almost. So you kind of get, like, two half stories fused together into one slightly longer than usual story. That's the impression I got from the whole thing, especially now that I had more time to think about it. That said, I do need to make it very clear. I don't think it was bad. I think it was very good. I feel like it was a really interesting and compelling angle to go for with the third party involved, a three amigos situation where two to get together, and you throw in the additional wrinkle of that one of them, pining for one of the others, and how you really going to go about that, because that's an emotional time and it's a big thing. And when it really does focus on that, it really was strong, and I feel it worked very well. And there were some really sweet moments, from all of the combinations of the characters. It was good. I just feel it needed like one more draft. Like, I think the script needed to be looked over just one more time, trim the fats, tighten up a few little aspects here and there. And when all was said and done by that point, I feel like you would have had a very solid and compelling, contending story. And at the very least, I feel like it wouldn't end up at the bottom of the rankings through, not because it's bad, but through necessity. When I'm going to rank these myself when I'm done covering all of them. And the thing is, wherever a girl's story ends up, it's not because, that was the bad story. It's because, if you're ranking something and you're making a top 5 of 5 good things, even a good thing is going to have to be at the bottom of the list. So that's the sort of thing. And, I feel like there would be more debate about Shizune's story being higher up on anybody's given interpretation of the ranks of preference of the stories if it was just that little bit better. I feel like Shizune's was so close to being just as emotionally moving as the other 4, and it just needed that little bit of extra work. But aside from that, I still thought it was very good. Next up, we have Rin. Oh boy, Rin. My goodness. Okay, so Rin's story is fascinating because, again, she's sort of like Hanako in the sense that you don't really end up in a relationship with her until potentially at the end. There's the implication there that, something had happened there. I feel like by the end, it's very evident that Hisao and Rin do love each other. They're just having a hard time communicating it, and that's the name of the game for the whole story. Rin's lack of arms, I feel like it's interesting because one of the main things about these girls, and the point of this entire game, is that none of the girls' disabilities really have much of anything to do with the actual conflicts or issues of their stories. Like, Emi's isn't about how she lost her legs, but, it still kind of gets brought up at least. It's attached to the trauma of when she lost her father. And, Shizune's deafness doesn't play that big a role in anything other than the fact that Hisao needs to learn sign language, and her family never bothers to learn it, so, there's that angle. But with Rin, her lack of arms has literally nothing to do with her story. Her disability has zero impact on how her story goes at all. If she had arms, it would have been the exact same story. This is actually the story of what I believe, after I consulted with my friend, Nightstar. I always thought it, but he very much convinced me, especially after the scene where it's shown that Rin is fully capable of just being able to speak backwards without any issue whatsoever. It is the story of a boy falling in love with an autistic girl and trying to figure out how to communicate and emotionally connect with her, and vice versa for her to him. That is the actual conflict here, because it's like they never say it outright, and I guess, again, I can't diagnose stuff, but it feels like the whole goal right out the gate was just, Rin, she's so strange and out there and says these weird things and is really quiet sometimes, but then sometimes she'll talk a lot, and then she always goes on these tangents, and she's just really weird and strange, And I can say this as somebody who is himself on the autistic spectrum. I am, in fact. Not to the degree that I believe that Rin is meant to be, or a large majority of people when you think about that sort of thing, but I am. So I get it. And verbalizing and communicating your thoughts and feelings, for me alone, is actually really difficult. So if Rin is even further down that path, it suddenly becomes almost this Herculean, impossible, pushing a boulder up a mountain type ordeal, where you try. In your mind, it makes sense to you, but the words and the things that you're saying to people don't make any sense to them. And when you do that, it becomes frustrating, and you feel like the world itself doesn't understand you, and you're wondering, well, what is wrong with me? I don't understand. I'm just telling people how it is, and when I do things, and I try to make people happy, like Rin does, and then all of a sudden, it didn't go the way that these people apparently thought it would, and now they're yelling but I did what they asked, and it makes a lot of sense when you look at it from that perspective. All of the pieces of Rin's story fall together that way when you look at it, because that's how almost every character in the story for her is trying to figure out. Hisao, Emi, and the art teacher are all trying to understand Rin without, I guess, ever really coming to terms with the fact that she has that kind of condition, which is very realistic, because a lot of people just don't even get diagnosed about that. And in the best possible ending, Hisao is able to finally at least get closer. He's able to sort of see through the fog and understand Rin in a capacity. And they're able to finally really get started. Like, again, as I was talking with Nightstar about it, Rin never wanted to have the art exhibition. She did it because Hisao said that she should. And I think even at that point, she cared about Hisao a lot and wanted to do it for him. So when you take into consideration that the entire reason that she was doing that at all, despite being massively uncomfortable with it, was purely to make him happy, it makes the fact that when he got so upset from not being able to understand or communicate with her, why Rin was so confused. She went through all of that effort. She, thought the need to destroy herself and seclude herself and do all of these things that she was totally not comfortable with, purely for the sake of being able to try and make him happy, because she thought that that's what he wanted her to do, wanted her to be. And when that didn't go out the way that she thought, and definitely didn't go the way Hisao thought, there was obviously going to be conflict there. And it wasn't until they were finally able to sort of make that breakthrough that they were able to finally patch things up, and I feel like they were both able to sort of understand each other and make that ever so vital connection at the very end. Like, I feel like only then did it feel like there was really going to be progress. That's another one I really wish there was a bit of a prologue with, just to see how much further it could go. I personally do believe that the two of them loved each other, and they were going to make it work. It was just going to take longer than most relationships. I feel like that was probably going to be the case. It was going to take more steps, but with enough patience and enough understanding and just enough goes of it, they could make it work, and they were going to. Rin's story I find really interesting because of how melancholically beautiful it is. Like, even more so than any of the other ones. Like, when Rin told Hisao to just be, when he asked her what he could possibly do for her, and she just asked him to be, I don't know why, but that felt really powerful to me. And I feel like when you really pay attention to Rin and the things she says, a lot of the things she says and does make sense. You just need to look at things from her perspective and understand the type of person that she is. And when you do that, it all makes a lot of sense. I really liked Rin's story. It was super duper duper good. I can see how some people would find it just confusing, especially if you've never had to, like, not even just if you've never dated somebody like Rin. If you've just ever had a friend like Rin, then I feel like you could understand her better and you'd get more out of her story. But if you've never experienced the type of mentality of a person like Rin has, you'd probably just end up like, okay, I know the ending was happy, but I don't feel like I really understand what that was all about. So I could easily see how that could possibly happen to somebody. And it might not rank that high for them because they just were never able to get it. But for someone like me, and for anybody who has, and they're able to understand who Rin is and what she's trying to do, I feel like you get a lot more out of it, and I did get a lot out of it, and I think it was a truly special story. It's one that I feel like almost out of all of them, possibly out of all of them, it's the one I think about the most after having finished. Because it asks a lot of interesting questions, and it just lets you think about them. And, you know, I feel like some of the best stories do that. So, yeah. That's Rin. And lastly, we have Lily. Lily is a phenomenally interesting story for me, because I find it, more so than even Emi, out of all 5 of them, the single most straightforward, and you could even potentially say vanilla love stories of the 5 of them. They're, like, if it's the last one you play, then you're going to get lured into this weird false sense of security of, like, is nothing bad going to happen? Because with all of the other stories, some kind of conflict happens in chapter 2 or 3. But with Lily, the major conflict, then the wrench in the relationship, doesn't happen until the last hour and a half of her story in Act 4. And if it's the first story you do, then you're going to get this weird false impression that I guess this is how all of them are going to be, and nothing really that, you know, sad or upsetting is going to happen, and you're going to get really caught off guard. That said, holy hell, is what they did effective, because Lily's story did what the other 4 stories didn't really do nearly as much, and they really played into Hisao's heart condition. They really made it a strong and firm plot point. It was a it mattered. With Emi, it's like, you know, it comes up a little bit because that's the entire reason you start exercising in the first place, and you get stronger as a result. But with Lily, it's like he keeps having these heart flutters after just little bits of these things. He has another one and another one. Where in the Hanako and Shizune stories, they basically almost never come up, and in Rin's, it basically doesn't become a thing at all. Like, after Act 1, it's just nuts. After he has a talk with her about it, and he cries over it, that's the last you hear about the condition. It's not even a plot point anymore. In Lily's, it's super important, because Lily herself is such a reserved and methodical girl, a woman, that, you know, you don't get a lot of outside conflict. So basically, it uses, very wisely, I feel, Hisao's condition to make, you know, kind of build up to its ending. Basically, it's like, oh, Hisao's heart condition is very serious. This is a very noteworthy problem. He has at least one major attack in every chapter. So when you get to the end and he has an actual second full-on heart attack, which doesn't happen in any other stories, you're like, oh my god! And it really hits you. But, that said, Lily's story, you would think, because it doesn't actually have any conflict until, like, basically the very, very end, you'd think it was a very boring story, right? Like, unlike with every other girl where stuff starts happening as early as the second chapter, you know, you just have a lot of pleasant conversations with her. You know, you go on a couple dates with her. You just have tea with her and Hanako or with Akira. And you just have all of these really pleasant conversations. And, you know, sometimes they veer into the more, you know, sad elements of things. But it's really just the two of them getting to know each other. And maybe it's because I'm just a cheesy cornball, but I really, really enjoyed that. I am a sucker for heartwarming romances like that. It was really, really sweet, and you unquestionably felt deep in your soul that these two loved each other so much. And I'm gonna actually have to bring this up. Their first love scene together, when you actually read the dialogue, it doesn't even come off as erotic in any capacity. It comes off as sweet and heartfelt, and like there's this real legitimate physical and emotional lock and connection between the two, and you just feel happy for them. And it's so crazy just how effective it was. So by the time that there is a conflict, you're like, no, they're doing so well. They obviously love each other so much. Don't have this happen. And then all of this stuff happens, and then they go away, and Hisao goes off on that stand, and he ends up in the hospital, and you just feel like your intestines have been ripped out. You feel gutted. It feels so painful. And you get one of those with all of the stories. But, like, you know, with Emi and Hanako and Shizune and Rin, with all of them, you know, even in the low points, you know, you feel like, you know, the low points start kind of early, you know? You get down, but then you fix it. You go down, and then you fix it. And then you have one big down, and then you have one big fix. And then everything is happy in the end. But with Lily, it's just this steady upward incline for almost the entirety of the story until the very end, where it dive bombs. It just, like, absolutely plunges you into this melancholic depression where everything is going wrong and you just want it to be okay. Like, you know, like all of the other stories condition you to be like, all right, so, you know, things are shaky, but you can fix it. Things get shaky again, but you can fix it. With Lily's, it's just nonstop happy, 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 sweet, lovely, wonderful times. You know, the heart flutters keep you on your toes a little bit, but, you know, you don't think too much of it because, especially if it's not the first route you've gone through, you figure it's not going to matter that much, really. At the end of the day, we're here because of the relationships, and this relationship feels the most solid and foundation-filled because we experience it more. You know, like you actually go on dates with Lily. You don't really do that with Shizune or even Rin to an extent. You do have one sort of date with Rin, and it's a very effective. But with Lily, it really does feel like you're just constantly making these new emotional connections, and you're asking about each other's pasts. And, you know, because Emi, you know, she hides from her past. She tries to not think about it so it doesn't get brought up. But with Lily, she's open about it. So she tells you about her past. You tell her about yours. You're just constantly making these brand new connective threads with each other. So when it's finally jeopardized, you freak out. You don't want that to happen. And good God, that ending. When you hear the music box. Oh my God. Oh, God, man, that just, damn, it felt good. Damn, it felt good. Straight out the gate. Oh, and the epilogue was beautiful, too. I wish all of the girls had an epilogue. I feel like Lily is one of the stories that definitely could use one, and I'm glad it had one. I wouldn't say it was the one that needed one the most. I feel like if only one girl got an epilogue, I feel like it should have probably been Hanako, then maybe Rin, but and then Lily, you know. But besides that point, you get one last moment after the credits where like everything is fine. Hisao got healthy again. They're gonna go off, and even Akira gets to have a happy ending. It just it leaves you feeling good, and that's fantastic. Alright, so I believe I've talked about all of the girl stories, so I guess you kind of want to know what I feel, like what my favorite is. It's kind of tricky, honestly, because, you know, all of the stories are really doing their own thing, and I don't want to put one at the bottom because, you know, I think all of them are good, but, you know, even a good one's got to be at the bottom. And as a result, I feel like it really won't surprise you, just for the fact that, you know, as I was talking, I feel like Shizune's does have to be at the bottom. I feel like, while a very strong story in of its own right, it just needed more to it, you know? And I feel really glad, and this is, I don't know how mean this will sound. I'm really glad it wasn't the first story I did, because I feel like I would have been somewhat underwhelmed, especially after all the build-up the game has given me over the, you know, after all this time and people telling me how great it is. I'd be like, was fine, you know? I enjoyed it. I don't know if it was amazing. And if it was the last one I did, I feel like that wouldn't have been the best high note to end it off on. I feel like the fact that she was dead in the middle for this Let's Play was very lucky for us. Because I feel like we had up, a bit of a, but then up. It's good. It's a good story. It just needed more. So I feel like that's going to put it in 5th place. 4th place, this feels wrong because of just how beautiful of a story it really ultimately was in the end. But somebody has to be on that level, and I think it has to go to Hanako. I loved the story. I really did. And I can't even really pull out a thing to criticize it with, really? Other than maybe actually getting to see the two as an actual couple just a little bit more, just a tiny bit more. It was a really great story. The problem is the other 3 just did more for me personally, I feel, is the best way to put it. So while I loved Hanako, I loved her story, she's a great girl, but I just feel like the other 3 stories affected me emotionally just a little bit more. Now, these top 3. Oh my goodness, these top 3. Okay. I feel like Emi, Rin, and Lily's stories are the best ones, in my personal opinion. And I feel like you could say any one of them is the best. But if we're talking to me specifically, okay, this hurts the most, especially considering how much I praised it and how much I relate to it and how much I personally loved it. I think I'd have to go, 3rd place would have to go to Rin. And I hate saying that. I really do. Because I can easily see it being considered the best. And there is so much good going for it. Just straight up. So I can't say... I have nothing... Okay, with these final 3 stories, I don't have really much any criticism to make at all. Really, I actually don't. All of these are just phenomenal. I think the thing that goes... That puts it under the other 2, for me, is just how cerebral it is. Rin's story is the thinking man's path. It's the one that's gonna ask the most questions. It's the one that's gonna make you think the most. It's the one that's gonna twist your mind the most. It's the one that's gonna really get you feeling conflicted. That is what it's trying to do, and it does that very, very, very well, and I applaud it very much for it, 100%. But even with its incredibly beautiful ending, I feel like I just wanted, I don't know, maybe I appreciate a bit more stability, a bit more of that. I don't know how to phrase it in a way that doesn't make it sound like I'm putting it down. That's what's really bugging me so much. I hate saying, yep, 3rd place is Rin, when it doesn't feel like a bronze medal. It feels like an epic. So much good is in this story, and I have the audacity and the gall to put it in 3rd place? That just feels insulting, doesn't it? It really does. I hate that. I don't want to do that. But I don't have a choice. Something has to be in 3rd, and I guess it's just gonna have to be Rin, and that sucks, but I hope I made it clear just how much I loved the story anyway, okay? Okay. Now, final 2. Oh boy, final 2. I'm still ping-ponging back and forth on what to call number 2 and number 1. I still, right to this very moment as I speak to you, don't fully know. And I guess okay, you know what? I guess I'll just go with my heart, okay? I don't know how I'll be able to explain it or justify it in my head or even to myself, because I feel like either could be called number 1. I'm going to say number 2 is Emi. I'm going to say number 2 is Emi. And I can't understand or explain to you why I've chosen that. I actually cannot, because Emi's story is phenomenal. Personally, in my opinion, It portrays a girl that's going through some very understandable, very empathetic problems. And when you get that good ending, you feel so good. You feel so happy that these two made it work, and that Emi is going to be able to get better, and that Hisao is getting better with his condition, and everything. All of it. Just, it's so good. It's so good. I can only assume the reason I'm going to call number 1 Lily is just because I guess maybe I'm just that kind of a hopeless romantic. I don't know. But I loved how relentlessly sweet and compassionate that relationship between the two of them was. Like, I feel like that's probably why Emi is able to get up as high as she does, because she has the second best, I feel, of that. You know, you actually do still go on a date with her, and you feel genuine connection, and you feel like these two genuinely do love each other, and, you know, they go through a rough spot, and you want to get them through it. But, you know, you have, like, a mini argument in, like, you know, chapter 2 or 3, and then you kind of, you work through it. And then you have the big one, and you gotta get through it. But maybe it's just the emotional... It's like... Okay. Emi's story is a roller coaster that goes up for a while, then he goes down, and then it builds up to, like, a mid-sized thing, and then goes woo, back down, back to up, you know? Whereas with Lily, it's like this huge anticipation. It's this roller coaster that feels like it's going straight up vertically. It's just going up. And the entire time you're like, eventually we're gonna reach the top. Eventually we're gonna slide down. We don't know when. The anticipation, it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds. And then finally you reach the top and you are going down in that roller coaster so fast. And you have all the feelings in your stomach, and you feel your heart in your throat, and you just want, no, come on, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, and you finally get there. And then your heart's able to finally settle down, and you just have all these endorphins going through you, and you finally feel at peace, and you're just like, damn, that buildup was worth it. Damn, that felt right. Emi's is basically it's a story with two of those that are slightly less as high up, because they have to go up and then back down, then you go up again and then down again. Whereas Lily, it's just one big one. It just builds you up. It fleshes out this relationship. It gives you all this stuff with Hanako. It gives you everything. And you know what? At the end of the day, I feel like more of the characters are happiest at the end of Lily's story. I feel like her and Shizune are basically on the road of being able to repair their relationship. Hanako is in a really good place. We don't see too much of Emi and Rin. That's the one downside. But you know, it feels like the most is right with the world as you're gonna get for everybody, as you're gonna get out of an impossibility. That's the worst part. I hate the fact that, man, when you go through a story, like you go through one girl, the other four girls, you know they're going through stuff, and you want to be there for them and help them too, but you can't because you're on this story right now. That bugs me. And that's exactly why I do not, in any game where there's a relationship system, ever decide to go against the original person that I go with. So, yeah. Lily, Emi, Rin, Hanako, Shizune. All 5 very, 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 very good stories, okay? Hopefully I made that abundantly clear to you all. I don't want anybody anywhere to think that I don't think any of these are good. And you know what? I bet if you asked me tomorrow, I'd tell you that Emi's was the best. And that Lily's was second. I feel like those two are gonna... And you know what? I bet on some days, I'd even tell you Rin is number 1. I bet you I would. That's just the kind of game that this game is. And, yeah. I've given you an hour-long epilogue of my personal thoughts of Katawa Shoujo. I want to thank everybody. If you listen to this whole thing, thank you very much. You're absolutely wonderful. And even if you just watch some of it, or if you just watch the LP itself and nothing more, you're great. You're fantastic. This game is wonderful. I'm super glad that I played it, and I'm even more happy about how much you all seem to love it too. To the people who already had played it and knew what they were getting into and just wanted to see a new face react to these moments that you've become so iconic for you, I hope I was able to do that for you. To the people who have never played or seen this game before and this was your introduction, I hope that I was able to show it to be the work of art that it truly is. I mean that oh so very sincerely. With that, I hope you all had a fantabulously wonderful time. I'll see you all next time for a brand new Let's Play. It's gonna be good. It's always gonna be good. And you know what? If this game has taught us anything, we're all people. We all have our problems. We should all just try to understand each other, help each other out. And I hope that I can help you guys do that sometimes. Simple as that. I'll see you all later.